The seven deadly sins, also referred to as the capital sins or cardinal sins, constitute a categorization of vices in Christian, particularly Catholic doctrine, in accordance with the conventional enumeration. These sins are pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. These vices stand in direct opposition to the seven heavenly virtues. In this video, we are having the very first 7 Deadly Sins Awards. This means we are going to go through the past several years and award either people, groups, or establishments that are most guilty of the 7 deadly sins. As previously stated, the categories are pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. Our first category is pride. Pride is considered the original and worst of the 7 deadly sins on almost every list. This trophy is awarded to the nominee that has suffered consequences or has caused suffering to others due to their pride. Our nominees are Volodymyr Zelensky. As many of you know, on February 24, 2022, Russian troops invaded their neighboring country of Ukraine. This has costed many Ukrainian and Russian lives. Not only has this affected the two nations, but other ones as well, including the West, with high oil costs in Europe and rising inflation in the US/Canada from funding the war effort. Prior to the invasion, Russia was open towards a peace deal that would satisfy both countries. Unfortunately, it was sabotaged by the West with Boris Johnson as the messenger. Now that the war is continuing and more Ukrainians are dying, victory is an unrealistic outcome for Mr. Zelensky. However, he is adamant of continuing this war, even pleading for Western troops to enter, which of course would lead to a world war. Justin Trudeau. In February 2022, a truckers' convoy emerged in Canada when Trudeau's cabinet implemented a law that requires all citizens to be vaccinated. This also included truckers, even though their jobs require them being isolated in a box for the majority of their time. Rather than sitting down with the truckers or making any sort of effort to negotiate, Mr. Trudeau resorted to calling the truckers white supremacists and racists, even as going as far as freezing their bank accounts and anybody who donates to their movement. The economic loss from this convoy was $3.6 billion. Taxpayers bear the financial responsibility, covering the $300 per week for eligible workers through the Canadian Worker Lockdown Benefit, financing the $20 million federal and to local businesses grappling with revenue losses, and funding the $2.5 million for free public transit on Ottawa's LRT. The cost for additional police reinforcements amounting to millions of dollars will also be shouldered by taxpayers. Canadian citizens who didn't participate in this convoy, who had zero affiliation with the movement, suffered the consequences due to Mr. Trudeau's refusal to listen to the demands of the people. And the winner for the first Pride Award, Volodymyr Zelensky. Our second category is greed. This trophy is awarded to the nominee that has too much greed. Our nominees are Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, was the face of cryptocurrency. His company, FTX, was valued at $18 billion. He was eventually accused that he improperly used and mismanaged deposits from FTX customers, redirecting billions in unlawful obtained funds for personal gain and to support high-risk investments. These diverted funds were used to sustain his extravagant lifestyle, involving substantial spending unrelated to FTX. This allegedly encompassed personal expenses like over $200 million in real estate in the Bahamas, unconventional investments, and repaying entities that had previously provided loans to SBF hedge fund company Alameda. Alameda was borrowing money from FTX to fund some of their operations. The money that FTX was lending them was made up of customer deposits, meaning SBF pulled off one of the biggest Ponzi schemes since Bernie Madoff. Pfizer. During the dark times of COVID, the world was panicking and scientists were rushing for a vaccine. When mandates were being implemented, this caused a large uproar. Anybody that opposed this were labeled as conspiracy theorists. Every mainstream network unloaded infinite amount of facts from scientists that showed that yes, our vaccine was a 95% immunity to COVID, and that the more people get it, the more likely we are to destroy COVID. Well, it may have been a coincidence, but the top sponsors for these networks and scientists were Pfizer, and the amount of vaccines needed went from 1 to 2 to 3 and now 4. But did it work? While two head scientists of the CDC threatened to resign if booster mandates were made, independent biologists came out against the vaccine, claiming that it was not only ineffective but harmful. The same networks that claimed we need herd immunity now have admitted that herd immunity doesn't work for this particular vaccine. But don't worry. Pfizer made over $100 billion of profit during COVID. Reports in the summer of 2020 revealed that pharmaceutical companies were skipping the first phases of vaccine development due to the rush to save humanity. Looking back at it now, perhaps it was a rush for gold. The winner for the Greed Award is Sam Bankman-Fried. The next category that we'll cover is wrath. Wrath is defined as having uncontrolled rage, anger, and hatred as per the teachings in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The morally neutral emotion of anger transforms into the sin of wrath when it is aimed at an innocent person, when it is excessively intense or prolonged, or when it seeks an overly harsh punishment. Our nominees today are the ones that best demonstrated this trait. The nominees are Benjamin Netanyahu. If we had this award show during the past 10 years, we would probably be seeing Benjamin Netanyahu or Bibi Netanyahu in this category. We can go through his track record throughout his time as Prime Minister of Israel, but let's remain focused on more recent events. After the Hamas attacks on October 7, 2023 that took lives of 1,139 Israelis, including 766 civilians, Israel, led by Netanyahu, retaliated by launching missiles into the Gaza Strip, killing 24,448 Palestinians, including hospitals, mosques, libraries, and cemeteries. Plenty of world leaders have pleaded with Mr. Netanyahu to have a peace deal in Israel and to not further escalate the situation. Bibi has rejected these proposals, even going as far as recently saying that he expects the war to last at least a couple more months. As a result of Bibi's wrath, nations are divided and tensions are escalating into a conflict bigger than Israel. Hamas. Yes, even though I mentioned Netanyahu war hawk mentality, that doesn't leave Hamas off the hook. As previously mentioned, according to the Catholic Church, the morally neutral emotion of anger transforms into the sin of wrath when it is aimed at an innocent person, when it is excessively intense or prolonged, or when it seeks an overly harsh punishment. Hamas' attack on innocent civilians on October 7th and on previous events fits this description. Vladimir Putin. My attitude towards this war may be controversial. Putin had to send troops towards his neighboring country as their enemy NATO has made many attempts to absorb Ukraine, even going as far as organizing a coup to overthrow a pro-Russian government. However, it is easy to have this attitude when I am not being shot at by Russians. Regardless of the reasoning behind this invasion, one thing we can all agree on is that nobody wants people to die. An estimated 70,000 Ukrainians, including 10,000 civilians, have been killed, as well as 90,000 Russians. Although I am under the impression that this event isn't as black and white as the media portrays it to be, I don't think any of us would choose to keep our nation's influence if it means over 160,000 people have to be sacrificed. And the winner for the Wrath Award is Benjamin Netanyahu. The next category is lust. Considered the least deadly sin, despite this trait has consumed a lot of influential people in the last several years. Here are the nominees. Jeffrey Epstein. Although Mr. Epstein has been dead for a few years now, it seems odd in the first annual Deadly Sins Awards to not have Jeffrey in the lust category, especially since his infamous legacy is still impacting our world today. For the really happy people who don't watch the news, Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender of underage women. In 2005, federal officials identified at least 36 women that Epstein had sexually abused, some as young as 14 years old. In 2008, he pleaded guilty to the sexual abuse claims, as well as pleading guilty to arranging sexual activities with children in exchange for some form of compensation or benefit. This court ordered a severely harsh punishment of nearly 13 months in custody with extensive work release. In 2019, Epstein was charged for the sex trafficking of minors. It was revealed that Epstein organized a plan to get very influential people to engage in these activities on his island. It was alleged that Epstein had hidden cameras on his properties to blackmail these influential people. Maria Farmer, one of his artists that worked for Epstein, alleged that Epstein had a media room in his mansion that monitored the hidden cameras throughout his house and pointed out that it only monitored the bathroom and bedroom, stating that it was very obvious that they were monitoring very private moments. Jeffrey Epstein hinted at possessing potentially compromising information on influential individuals when in 2018 he reportedly told a New York Times reporter off the record that he had incriminating details about very powerful people. According to reports, Epstein suggested that he had knowledge about their sexual preferences and recreational drug activities, implying the existence of potential blackmail material. Harvey Weinstein. The allegations against Harvey Weinstein was nearly 7 years ago, but his actions has still have an impact in our world today. On October 31st, more than 80 women made allegations of sexual harassment or rape against Weinstein. In November 2017, Ronan Farrow revealed that Harvey Weinstein hired a British Israel intelligence group called the Black Cube. Weinstein reportedly used the Black Cube to target individuals such as journalists or actresses that have accused Weinstein of these accusations, often by collecting information on them, primarily using their personal or sexual histories to silence them. Even pleading with Hillary Clinton to stop Ronan Farrow from publishing the story about the sexual allegations against Weinstein. Nick Merrill, who was Hillary Clinton's publicist, made many attempts to stop Farrow, but was unsuccessful. According to actress Rose McGowan, who was raped by Weinstein, claimed that Jennifer Siebel Newsom, Gavin Newsom's wife, along with Weinstein's lawyer, tried to bribe McGowan and keep her quiet about the allegations against Weinstein. In May 2018, Harvey Weinstein was convicted of 23 years in prison. And the winner for the lust category is Jeffrey Epstein. Our next category is gluttony. Gluttony is defined as the overindulgence and overconsumption of anything to the point of waste, when one consumes far more than necessary, while others who are in need of the substance that you consume but do not receive it because of your overconsumption, you are guilty of being a glutton. Our nominees are the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, or the Fed, was formed in 1913 and was created to be a money manager for the United States. It was created in 1913 to help keep the economy in stable condition. Its main purposes are making sure that there are enough jobs, prices stay steady, and interest rates are reasonable. It also looks after the banks, making sure that they are safe and follow the rules. The Federal Reserve helps with how money moves around, does research on the economy, and provides important services. However, the Federal Reserve has received a lot of criticism, primarily that the Federal Reserve has not fulfilled its alleged purpose of keeping the economy stable that it was created for. In 2024, it is clear that the purpose of the Federal Reserve is not to keep the economy stable, but to keep particular people happy. The Fed was accused of creating booms and busts rather than a stable economy like it was created for. The booms and busts are more frequent, perhaps because the higher ups benefit from both occurrences. When the Federal Reserve's policy of low interest rates, specifically during periods of economic stimulus, can lead to asset price inflation. This tends to benefit those who own large financial assets such as stocks and real estate, so wealthy people that own these large assets get very rich, while everything gets more expensive for the regular folk. Many respected economists have accused that the Fed has played a role in the biggest economic crashes, primarily the Great Depression and 2008 recession. Their backing of the banks have led the banking sector to take unnecessary risks that greatly affect the country due to their safety net of being backed by the Fed. The U.S. military. From the Second World War until today, over 80% of the wars that the United States have been involved in occurred after the end of the Cold War in 1991. Wars are expensive. The total cost of the post-9/11 wars is about $8 trillion in current dollars. If the government tried to support these wars by raising taxes for the U.S. citizens to pay, there would be a major protest and pushback against the war efforts. And it makes sense. If I'm paying a large sums of money to the government, I'd hope I or the citizens of the country reap some sort of benefit from it. Well, the United States citizens don't have to worry about that, as the Federal Reserve has printed trillions of dollars from thin air to support these war efforts, raising inflation to an all-time high. But this is not about inflation or the Federal Reserve, but U.S. glutton for military intervention. The United States currently have troops in Libya, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, and now in conflict with the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea under Operation Ocean Shield, not to mention the proxy wars such as funding the war in Ukraine and Israel's offensive in Gaza. On Wall Street, there's a common phrase, which is business is war, and the United States Capitol, the common phrase is war is business. Majority of members of Congress that sanction these wars are sponsored by companies that are war profiteers, such as Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, etc. These companies fund politicians. The politicians sanction wars and increase the military budget. The military uses this large budget to purchase the products that these companies provide, hence the military-industrial complex. Everybody wins, except for the people who die in these wars. The Catholic Church defined gluttony of overconsumption to the point where it is unnecessary. The United States haven't had a necessary war since the World War II. And the winner for the Glutton Award is the United States military. The next category is envy. Envy can be defined as having resentment towards the possessions or the traits that someone or something has. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, envy has 3 stages. The first stage is when the envious person tries to lower or ruin one's reputation. The second stage, the envious person gets joy at another person's misfortune or grief at their success. And the third stage is hatred, because sorrow leads to hatred. Our nominees are Amber Heard. Probably the least important figure on this list, but probably the most famous, Amber Heard was in the headlines in the spring of 2022 when she faced a defamation case from her ex-husband, Johnny Depp, where she settled to pay Johnny Depp for $15 million. From the trial, it was concluded that Amber Heard lied about being abused by Johnny Depp to punish him for breaking up with her. Psychologists in the hearing came to the conclusion that Amber Heard was jealous towards her partner and his success, so much so that she attempted to ruin his career, reputation, and life once he decided to separate ties with her. Logan Paul. For a long time, Logan Paul was probably the most popular YouTuber on the planet. His younger brother Jake was also very popular, but he lived in the life of his brother's shadow until they both decided to box. Since 2018, Logan Paul has had 4 matches. Meanwhile, his brother has fought 9 times, mostly against MMA fighters and professional boxers, with an impressive record of 8-1. From Jake's success in this area, he has been receiving more attention and respect than Logan. Instead of being a supportive brother, this is what Logan thinks.
I think I'm better than you, and I think Nate chose you for a reason, and I think everyone knows that.
And the winner for the Envy Award is Amber Heard. Our next category is Sloth. Sloth, derived from the Latin words tristitia or acadia, meaning without care, encompasses a mix of concepts with roots in ancient times. These notions span mental, spiritual, pathological, and physical aspects. Sloth can be described as a lack of interest or a consistent reluctance to make an effort. Sloth is known to have the widest range of actions or traits that fall into the category of sloth, including laziness, lack of feeling or empathy, and cowardice, but mostly emphasize on laziness. So, for this category, we are going to award the candidate that has best showcased behavior of sloth, but leaning more into the trait of laziness. Our nominees are OceanGate. On June 18, 2023, OceanGate launched a Titan submersible underwater to visit the Titanic. After communication was lost for 1 hour and 45 minutes, authorities were alerted. After 4 days of searching, it was concluded that the Titan imploded, killing all members inside. Now, most listeners would assume that a small submersible in a pill-shaped form attempting to descend 12,500 feet imploding is expected. But from listening to the CEO of OceanGate, it is clear to see that the laziness of the operation played a large factor. CEO Stockton Rush stated, I quote, "At some point, safety just is pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything." Stockton Rush has also said, quote, "I've broken many rules to make Titan. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did." Norfolk Southern. On February 3, 2023, in East Palestine, Ohio, United States, a significant incident occurred when 38 cars of a Norfolk Southern freight train transporting hazardous materials derailed. Following the derailment, several rail cars caught fire and burned for over 2 days. Emergency crews eventually conducted a controlled burn of some rail cars, leading to the release of hydrogen chloride and phosgene into the air. Due to the potential dangers associated with the released substance, residents within a 1-mile radius were evacuated as a safety measure. In response to the emergency, collaborative efforts were initiated involving agencies from Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia to manage and address the situation. After the train derailment, discussions focused on concerns about working conditions and safety in the industry. Issues raised including the absence of modern brake safety regulations, the adoption of precision schedule railroading, PSR, reduced safety per train, and the increased lengths and weights of the train. Critics argued that the train companies, despite conducting stocks buybacks benefiting shareholders, neglected investment in maintaining and safety measures to prevent accidents. And the last award for Sloth for the first annual 7 Deadly Sins Awards is OceanGate. Thank you everyone for watching, and congratulations to our winners this evening. I also want to congratulate our nominees for their strong efforts in their respective categories. Even though you didn't get your awards, your effort and actions will never be ignored.